Hi, so this will be covering one more group of amphibians. This is what is a frog, looking at what makes a frog a frog. So again, if we're looking at the order that frogs are considered to be in, we're talking about Anura. Anura, that word breaks down to without tails, and these are amphibians that are noted for not having tails when they're adults, even though they do tend to have them when they're younger, when they're tadpoles. Anura includes all frogs and toads. They're all kind of in the same group together, even though those terms we use a little bit differently. They are pretty synonymous. They live in most moist environments. They don't live in higher latitudes in some islands throughout the world, and you also won't see them in a lot of colder regions, but still, they're pretty far spread out, especially compared to some of our other amphibians. They all have short bodies without tails, like we stated, whenever they're adults. So the typical Anura life cycle, this is probably one that you're pretty familiar with from earlier times in school. So again, we have adults that are producing eggs, fertilized externally, usually left to their own devices, developing into tadpoles that have gills. The tadpoles will gradually lose their tail and gain legs as they reach adulthood. Again, this is a metamorphosis that we're looking at. When we talk about reproduction prior to the life cycle, it's almost always external fertilization, as I stated before. So again, there's no sperm that is entering the female's body in order for fertilization to occur. Most of it occurs outside of the body. The males have what are referred to as nuptial pads. So if you see here on this diagram of a male bullfrog that we have, this area here on this digit is kind of enlarged, and it's designed to help them keep hold of the female during what we refer to as amplexus. Amplexus is when the male mounts on top of the female, and with most frog species, you will see that the male is significantly smaller than the female by comparison. Sometimes there are opportunities where multiple males will try and breed with the same female, like we're seeing here in this picture, which can be a little bit overwhelming for the female, but for the males, it helps basically select for genes that are a little bit stronger, or in some cases for a frog that is more opportunistic if it's coming at a certain time. So again, those genes will transfer on to the offspring. When tadpoles are born, or when they hatch from eggs, I should say, they are usually herbivorous. So again, we'll compare that to the diet adults have, but the young are usually herbivorous. They tend to eat a lot of algae that's in the water. So these clips here, all I wanted to express with these, and again, you can look at them on the presentation on Classroom to get a good look at them. We have variation within male calls. And again, amphibians or not amphibians in general, but frogs are much more vocal than the rest of the amphibians. This is part of why we see the tympanum behind the eye, again, that kind of round disc that helps them with hearing. It basically acts the same way that our eardrum would work. Again, when you see a male, in this case, American toad or any male frog, they have one call that they use very specifically for attracting mates. They have a different call called a release call, so that if it, again, most of this reproductive behavior happens at night, but if a male toad is grabbed, in this case by either another male or some other, or a predator, something that it doesn't want grabbing it, if it's trying to attract a female, it'll make a release call, kind of a more sharp, abrupt call that differentiates from the breeding call to let another party to let go of it. And then this video down here at the bottom is just about the actual fertilization process with eggs. It shows how many eggs are being produced by the female and that the male is, again, releasing sperm as they're heading out. So when we talk about the eggs, usually the parents will just leave them. That's kind of what we were used to with salamanders, but more similar to what we saw a little bit with caecilians in terms of parental care, we do see some forms of parental care in frogs. And again, I would look at these 4 different videos when you're looking at the presentation on Classroom. This one is all about the Pipa Pipa or Suriname toad, where the babies grow part of their life in the back of the mother as they're developing. There's the Darwin's frog, which again, the babies are living in a chamber near the vocal sac for a lot of their development inside of the father. The strawberry poison dart frog, where they will carry the babies around on their back and deposit them in plants that hold a reservoir of water, bromeliads. So they will do that and provide them with unfertilized eggs to eat. So again, maternal care, in this case, mom does that. And then an African bullfrog that helps with moving tadpoles from one pool of water to another. So again, we see a few different examples of specific parental care, even though most frogs don't participate in it. When we start to talk about the diet, we see this term come up again, opportunistic carnivores. So frogs are a little bit more active in terms of their predatory strategy, but they will eat just about anything that they can fit inside of their mouths. They're pretty ambitious in terms of the things that we'll take. So we see here frogs eating invertebrates, which we're used to, a frog eating a mouse, and in this case, a frog even eating another frog. It's not unheard of. As far as looking at things from an evolutionary perspective, this is our first true tongue. Again, the tongue of a frog is developed in a certain way. The hinging point for the tongue, it kind of flips out and flips back. And again, there are some videos a little bit later on that show how this works, but that leverage motion kind of helps to help the tongue spring out, collect food, and spring back. It doesn't truly extend the way that you see in cartoons. That's kind of more of a chameleon thing. But frogs, they have a tongue that's mounted at the front part of their mouth, flips out, flips back. So again, this is the video clip that kind of talks about how the tongue moves. It shows it in slow motion. It also talks a little bit about frog saliva and the stickiness component that it has in it. And this one shows the diets of bullfrogs and just the wide diversity of things that they do try to eat. When we start talking about annular locomotion, these are kind of more active amphibians as far as movement. So let me move my video down here so we can compare these two skeletons. So we've got our frog here and our salamander here, and you can see a lot of structural difference, especially in the legs, between the two. Frogs are great at jumping and swimming. The hind limbs are longer. You can see that they're pretty much about, in a lot of cases when they're fully extended, they're almost the same length as the body or pretty similar to it. And they have a modified pelvic girdle, again, when we're looking here in this area. They have powerful muscles in the legs that act as a lever. And the way that the legs are folded up, those muscles kind of hold tension in them, sort of like a rubber band when you pull it and you keep it tense. And then when that tension is released, they're able to jump really quickly out of a situation. Anyone who's ever tried catching frogs can tell you how good they are at jumping away from something that's trying to catch them. They have connective tissues that run from the pectoral girdle to the skull and vertebrae, acting as shock absorbers. So again, when they hit a surface, they want to be able to absorb some of that impact so that they aren't just going to splatter against something. It gives them a little bit of cushion for their landing since they, again, jump at a pretty good speed. And again, this is more kind of video footage of looking at things in slow motion, this time looking at the jump specifically. So again, if you are looking at the presentation on Classroom, go ahead and look at that clip. Then when we start talking about respiration, again, we see cutaneous respiration. So to refresh you on that term, that's when they are able to absorb oxygen through the skin. Cutaneous refers to the skin, respiration refers to breathing. And again, with certain frogs here, like the Lake Titicaca frog, you see that kind of wrinkly surface. This is similar to what we said with the hellbender in salamanders. All of that surface area allows them more opportunity to absorb oxygen inside of the water without having to do anything else. They do breathe with lungs as adults, and they do breathe with gills as tadpoles. So as tadpoles, when they're fully aquatic, they are using gills at that point in time. And this video here is talking about the Lake Titicaca frog. Again, because it does so much of its respiration through the water, it's very, very sensitive to pollution in the water. That's one of the big things that has been impacting this frog, as well as its role in traditional medicine in the area. So again, this video kind of covers that subject a little bit if you want to take a look at that. Then when we start talking about defense mechanisms, let me move down here again. So we see a variety of defense mechanisms within Anura. Again, all frogs are technically poisonous, but again, this is to varying degrees, just like with other amphibians. When you see these bright warning colors, like here, so this is a dart frog. Again, dart frogs have a very high toxin content in them, so those bright warning colors let a predator know, if I eat this, there's a chance I could get sick or I could get poisoned. A lot of them also employ camouflage, so when we see ones that try to blend in with their environment, some of them do what we call posturing. So this toad is kind of demonstrating that by placing its legs and feet on the ground and lifting its body up to make itself appear larger. Sometimes this can scare some predators away. Loud noises. So if you've ever seen a Cope's gray tree frog, maybe you found one in a tree or hiding in a plant somewhere, they usually let out a short, sharp bark whenever you try and grab a hold of them, and that's designed to maybe make you drop them for a second. Again, some predators might be surprised by it and they may let the frog go. The other thing, and again, this is part of that video clip that talks about the Darwin's frog and taking care of its offspring. Not only that, the other strategy that it has is playing dead inside of its environment. If it sees a predator and it's near a stream of water, it will play dead and float downstream to get to safety while it's floating on the water. It's very fascinating to look at. Very strange frog. A lot of unique adaptations. So again, frogs are very diverse, but I hope that this helped clear up some points about frogs as a group.